Gamera finally returns after 18 years with the Netflix series Gamera Rebirth. How does this series stack up to the excellent last 4 entries in the Gamera franchise? It's a mixed bag, but it has some extreme highs and some notable lows, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Hi everyone, I'm KaijuCinema, and today we're going to be reviewing this series, and we're going to be going through very minimal spoilers. This is going to be a safe review for people who are interested in watching the series that haven't yet. We're only going to be talking about some of the monsters that appear in the trailer, and some very vague, very purposely vague plot details, just to make a couple critiques that shouldn't take away much from the viewing experience, I don't think. So, like I said, this should be a very safe place for people who are cautious of spoilers, but there will be some details. Gamera Rebirth is both a really impressive effort in a lot of ways, but also a little bit of an underwhelming return for the series. The elephant in the room here is its visual presentation. It has many elements to it, 2D background, some 2D characters, mostly 3D characters, the 3D CGI Kaiju obviously, and these kind of stock, explosion and smoke effects. The big problem here is they range a lot in quality from decent to pretty terrible, but a really big problem is that they don't mesh well. They visually clash a lot, and that takes away a lot from maybe viewer immersion into this universe. But when getting right into it, the elephant of the elephant in the room is the 3D human characters. They really don't look good. We get glimpses of 2D characters and 2D versions of our cast of characters, which look really great, and that almost makes it more disappointing because we can see what could have been, but we just don't get it, and it's sad, but it's something that you do get used to over time. But a really big, not to say that makes it acceptable or good, but you do get mostly used to it. They don't really express emotion and stuff well, but the biggest problem is general motion and action. The human characters, a lot of elements visually suffer from this, but the human characters especially suffer from issues with frame rate and frame rate consistency. This is a really big problem for this series, and a lot of the time when humans are moving around, they're moving at only a few frames a second, and it is jarring, and it feels disappointing for a series that has been recently known for a lot of quality visually. So, take that for what you will. What isn't talked about much is those stock elements like the explosions and dust clouds and stuff that I mentioned. They really clash with the general art style of the show, because some of these are appropriately cartoonish and stylized, but because they're just kind of plucked from all these sources online, it seems I feel like I've seen a bunch of these effects a million times. Some of them, like these explosions, are really hyper realistic, and it really doesn't work in the animated universe that they're in, and a lot of the colors and those effects don't really match the gray values of the scene that they're in, and it's distracting. It's not great. There's no way around it. Most of the visual elements of the series really don't look good. While the very detailed kaiju next to the under-detailed 3D humans is not a good match, the kaiju themselves look, move, act, all amazing. They look great. They lend themselves to some incredible spectacle. The kaiju fights in this series are awesome. Chief among them is Gamera versus Giron. Giron gets the biggest facelift out of any of these kaiju, and all these kaiju have really great redesigns, with one exception, but we'll get to that.
Quick! Save as many as you can! Get out of here!
Gamera vs. Giron is great. It's an amazing fight. All the fight scenes in this series, except for one, are really great and really impressive. And you should, even if nothing else about this review convinces you to watch it, I think you should watch it for these fight scenes. They're great. And if nothing else, watch the Gamera versus Guron fight scene. It is one of the best kaiju action sequences of all time. Arguably up there right with the best. It is something special. It is great. It is the high point of the series. The one kaiju sequence that isn't very satisfying is Virus. Virus is hyped up a lot throughout the series, and it's very powerful, but its fighting style does not lend itself to a very exciting sequence, and because of that, you know, it's just underwhelming, I guess, is how I would describe it. You know, that's about it. The kaiju and stuff look good, but by and large, visually, with the humans and stuff that we spend the most time with, it does not quite make the cut as to what I would call good. It's pretty poor, but there are other parts of this series to talk about. The music it's fine. It neither offends nor excels. The ending credit song is really awesome. They play a couple songs like Anger, which is a theme that plays when Gamera is fighting. They play some songs like that a bit too often, but it doesn't get too annoying or anything like that. It's still decent music, but it's nothing that I'm going to like write home about, you know. The story in kaiju media is way more important to me than most. A lot of people, like, I've talked a lot about spectacle and stuff, and for a lot of people that's what they come to kaiju media for, and they'll say stuff like, you gotta ignore the human story, or I wish they would take the human story out of these things, or, you know, stuff like that. And that is something I don't subscribe to at all, especially anymore. I think there's not a distinction between the human story and the kaiju story. It's just a story, and it should all work together. It should just feel like a coherent story. I'm not judging these things separately. I'm not giving a movie with great kaiju stuff, you know, an entire pass for bad human stuff. Nothing like that. So this stuff is important to me, at least, in my perception of kaiju media. And the story here, while not exceptional, is fine. It's pretty safe. It's going to be very familiar to fans of the Showa era of Gamera, but has some, you know, allusions and stuff to things that are familiar to those of us who, like myself, who really love the Heisei era of Gamera. But I think there's appeal in both ways here. Fans of the Showa era obviously going to feel more at home and comfortable, and it's a nice, familiar, warm, you know, thing. But fans of people who are not maybe fans of the Showa era, like myself, will kind of have a very fresh appreciation for this, because at least for me, it felt like I was seeing what, like, I couldn't see in the Showa era of Gamera for so long. So it was kind of novel and enjoyable in that way, and I could really appreciate that. When it comes for the story structure, it's really good. This is one of my favorite parts of the series. 45-minute anime episodes is something I want all the time. It just feels like the right length. It'll never happen for most anime or many anime, but it feels right, and 20-minute episodes feel not right. This is good, and for 6 episodes, each episode has kind of their own, well, not entirely self-contained, but kind of contained story with a kaiju, and it works really well to, like, stop in, watch an episode for about an hour, go do something, come back maybe later the next day and pick it back up. It's really easy to do that. It's a great series for that. It's really well structured. This is something that isn't talked about enough in these kind of shows, and it really works here. When it comes to human characters, Gamera has always had a leg up on a lot of kaiju media because Gamera is intrinsically connected to human characters. And that is no different here, except Gamera is kind of mainly connected to one character, and maybe not the most organic way, but it still lends itself to a greater connection contextually between the kind of the human and kaiju world conflicts. It connects things well, and the big picture conflict of the series also does well to connect these things. The plot is generally pretty safe, but it works, and while this is not going to be anything exceptionally exciting for people are very familiar with Gamera and Kaiju media, it is something that is familiar and it works well enough. When it comes to the actual characters, they can be a bit of a mixed bag. They're all very generic and very cliche, which your mileage may vary with this, and it's not a new kind of story or themes when it comes to the cast of characters. It revolves around a lot around normal circumstances of kids kind of, having to move away and lose their friends for a bit or forever. And it's sad, and they're that kind of conflict is then kind of spun into this kind of larger than life adventure. And while this is a very tried, true, cliche kind of story, I've been always a sucker for it. And the characters can sometimes be a little bit obnoxious, but most of the time I say they lean towards likable, and especially I like the main character, Boko, and Brody is actually one of the few characters that has a serviceable kind of arc, so that's good to see. But when it comes to, I have a soft spot for these kind of stories about, kids having to move away and circumstances affecting their life and friendships. It's a kind of experience I'm familiar with, so even if I've seen it a million times, it's always going to affect me in some way, and that's no different here. I really appreciated that, and while it wasn't incredibly compelling, it was compelling enough for me. And maybe it's just because it appeals to a soft spot of mine, and your mileage may vary, but I enjoyed it, and I assume a lot of you will probably get a kick out of it or find it serviceable. Also, just one more thing I wanted to mention about the plot. Well, it's generally pretty safe. It has a few kind of twists. Like, there's the big twist that I find pretty predictable, but there's some little twists in there that are like, I did not see that coming, that's fun, and stuff like that, where it's like, it's nothing earth-shattering or anything like that, but it's like, that's a pleasant surprise, and that works pretty well, and it kind of it keeps you engaged with the story well enough, and I think it does a good enough job. It's nothing incredible, but it works. Like I've said redundantly a bunch of times, this story is good enough, but that has some exceptions. There are some hiccups in the story, a lot of kind of odd or underdeveloped story beats. It's impossible to get into without a couple examples, so mild spoiler warning. This is not really big spoilers, but if you're really afraid, definitely skip ahead just a little bit, because it'll be over in like 20 seconds. But first one, Gamera gets hurt saving the cast of characters. It's kind of undefined how this happens, and because it's so important to the rest of that episode, it kind of takes you out of that story a little bit. It's like, what happened? It's like they neither showed nor told. It's not a great way to communicate that part of the story. And there's also a romantic angle that happens in the middle of the series and is dropped almost immediately. The romantic angle is forced and kind of out of nowhere to begin with, and it is dropped just as out of nowhere, and it's kind of confusing. This is like a lot of the series. The script feels like it needed more time in the oven, more time, more drafts, more money. This whole series feels just undercooked is how I describe it, even if there's a lot of good stuff there. This series, like a lot of Gamera entries, is pretty confusing in its the demographic that it's seemingly trying to appeal to. We have a story that feels pretty geared towards a younger audience, like the age of the characters in the series, but at the same time, these characters are saying fuck every 20 seconds.
Just leave us alone, you dick! Oh, shit! How dare you, you little runt! I said hands off, you fucking pig!
And Gamera is just goring up these monsters in a kind of obscene ways, and you kind of get a little confused as to who this is for, admittedly, but like I said, this is not entirely unfamiliar for Gamera, and it's a fun, unique appeal. It's interesting. A lot of people have compared it to the Goonies, and I kind of see that, And, you know, like a lot of things in this series, your mileage may vary, but if it's something that sounds interesting to you, go for it. If this is something you want to watch with maybe your kid, I would probably be cautious. Probably depends on maybe their maturity or, you know, how old they are. If you're an adult, you're obviously fine, but like whether or not this kind of thing appeals to you is more up in the air. If you're a younger kid and your parents are totally cool with you watching this will probably be great for you, you know? So it's got a very unique appeal, and you know, take that for what you will. That's kind of all up to you whether or not that's for you. As hard as I feel like I kind of have been towards the series in this review, that's mostly because there's been a lot of really kind of interesting and unique things to criticize about the series that I don't really have to say about many series or anything like it. So it's just kind of an interesting experience, and that's why I've had a lot to say negative. But overall, the series is solid. It's maybe not, sorry, motorcycle, but it's not the best series maybe for newcomers, but long-term Gamera fans are going to really love this, and I really hope, you know, it just feels good to be back in the Gamera series. It's like my big takeaway from this. It felt like a warm blanket, and I really liked it. And I pray that we get more of the big guy. Overall, I give the series a 3 out of 5, which is a good, decent, you know, competent score, I think. It has a number of flaws, but if you can look past those, there's a lot of good stuff to be found in here. Like I said, going to be great for Gamera fans. I would recommend the Heisei trilogy first for newcomers, but this isn't the worst place to start either. But, you know, now that I've been talking for God knows how long, I want to turn the discussion over to you. What did you guys think of this series? I want to know everything you thought. What do you think about the plot, the monsters, etc.? What do you think about Gamera's future as a franchise? Let me know in the comments below. Even if after you watch the series come back, please let me know. I really would love to see what you guys think. We're living in an incredible age for kaiju media, and it is kind of unfathomable how much has changed. It's incredible, and if you're looking for more kaiju media discussions, reviews, etc., in this crazy time, subscribe. Hey, stick around. I would love to see you. Leave a like on the video, show some support, and you guys have yourselves an amazing night. And like I said, I hope to see you stick around. Bye.